Well, I didn't expect to hear that at 3:18. Welcome back into our little round table. The normal suspects, yours truly, Willie Daunick, Darren McFarland, and we have added as our designated hitter today, former Cleveland Indians right-hander, former Vanderbilt Commodore Jensen Lewis, who is in town. And we're talking this story out of the Miami Clinic, and Yahoo Sports has added to it with a report that Major League Baseball has gotten a group of minor league players that they know were dealing with this Miami lab, and given the fact that they don't have the kind of protection that the major league players do, have basically threatened them with their professional lives if they don't rat out the big league guys. So I'm going to ask all of you this same question. Is anybody with any stature as a Major League Baseball player going to come out in the next 30 to 60 days and really tell it like it is and say, let's throw the book at the cheaters?
Hasn't that already happened? There have been some guys that have come out and said.
Yeah, but has anybody had any impact? I mean, David Hernandez did it, reliever in Washington. But I guess I'm talking like you all threw out at me after the commercial, a Derek Jeter type.
See, the way I envision it, because right now I think Jensen has hit on the dilemma. You guys were talking about Mr. Ed and Horses' Heads and The Godfather and Animal House. All
Darren,
that
how'd that work when you opened the locker and got the horse?
The message is sent.
Was it?
The message was sent. And unfortunately, the
crystal
message,
clear.
It's not just the message
Clear?
that day.
Crystal.
It marks you for life, really, right? If you rat out somebody, you're toast. Even if you're trying to do the right thing, it just doesn't go over well in that fraternity. And so if I'm in those shoes, as much as I might want to tell the truth, I might try to avoid those guys too, unless you had a leadership group from the top of players that got together and said, guys, we need to decide as players how we want this game to be. We have basically decided that we're going to be secretive about it. We're not going to rat anybody out. And you do what you got to do. Take somebody's job if you need to who's clean, but if you got to take the risk, if you think the risk is worth it, then do it. Do what you got to do to win. That's really the mentality that there's been, even with the added testing that's out there. And until that happens, I worry that this is still going to – it's not just going to go away.
No.
Until the players themselves decide they want to do something about it.
They have to change the culture, period.
Right.
They have to change the culture. Here's
they don't want,
the question
to do that, you can't make a guy feel bad if he wants to tell the truth.
No, well, that's part of changing the culture. You have to flush out the bad and change the culture. Here's the question that I have, Jensen. Now in 2013, because you've been around these locker rooms on the professional level, why would you want to cheat at this point? Because if you get caught, I think it's pretty clear, unless you guys tell me otherwise, we can start going down the list of all the guys who would be in the Hall of Fame that we would revere now that they have stepped away from the game. But that has all changed, and now they probably will never get into the Hall, and they will never be revered for anything other than you were a cheater. And so all the accomplishments go out the window. And so I say to you, why would you want to do that if you get caught and you know that it takes you cheating to get to that level or to a really high level? Why would you do it and risk it? Because if you get caught, you're done.
I think Frank Thomas commented about this. I can't remember when. I know it was recently, but you're finding guys now that are just playing for the money. What is the Hall of Fame now? What are the records? What are the numbers? Would you rather get the 5-year, $100 million deal, or would you rather go to the Hall of Fame?
That was, remember the question? We had that last year. I said, would you rather be A-Rod and have his accomplishments in let's say $500 million? That's what he walks away with. Career earnings, or would you do all that to be stained for the rest of your life?
Well, I think you look at the guys that have already been convicted or been labeled. Look at what they've made. And then I think you have to go man to man. You know, why did you do it? Did you do it to get better or for the obvious monetary gain? I mean, I think it really boils down to why are these guys playing the game today? Back in the day, you didn't get paid enough to be like, oh, well, you know, if I get really good and have one good year, I can make 2 or 3 years of guaranteed money at 10, 12, 20 million. I mean, you can live off that anywhere. But I think that it becomes a fundamental argument of why are these guys doing it in the first place? I think more often than not, you're going to look at it and say it's to get those millions of dollars.
If 10 years from now, the four of us sat down with Bonds, A-Rod, all of them, Sammy Sosa, the whole group, and said, was it worth it? What do you think their answers would be?
Well, let me try a couple of things on you. Number one, they never dreamed when they were doing this that Major League Baseball would ever get them backed so far into a corner that they would become, in baseball terms, social outcasts. None of them ever saw that coming. That's the first thing.
Well, Congress had a big part of
they did.
Making that happen.
But those players never dreamed that the penalties that would the social outcast part. Barry Bonds never dreamed that as the home run king, he would be viewed by virtually nobody as having that title. Now, let's go to a different one, though. You've brought up all the superstars, but what about Melky Cabrera, who has come off a year in Atlanta where some guy in Nashville is ripping his brains out? That's me. Over how bad he was. So he's sitting there saying, if I want to stay in the major leagues, I got no choice. I got to get on this stuff. And he got rewarded for it in the offseason to the tune of 2 years, $16 million in Toronto. So his answer to you is, man, it worked out great for me.
This is the alarming part of what you just said, George, to me. Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, and even to a degree A-Rod, to a degree, probably didn't know that there's a chance they would ever get caught and be the outcasts that they are. But doesn't that really say something about Ryan Braun and some of these other guys that have been caught? They knew that if they got caught, that they, number one, there's more penalties out there, and number two, their reputation is totally on the line. They see where those guys all sit right now. The Sammy Sosas, they're kind of in that outcast, and yet they still do it. What does that tell you about your question? They're doing it for the money.
You know who the poster child of that is?
They're willing to
Rafael
risk all that
Palmeiro,
and still do it.
who sat there and pointed to the members of Congress and said, I have never, and I repeat, never, and then goes out and gets caught cheating right afterwards. So, yeah, probably the answer we've already seen is, and that's a good point, George, it's the guys that, because you're right, what is Melky Cabrera? Without baseball, what is he going to do that's going to pay him $8 million a year?
Nothing.
Answer, nothing. So is it worth it to him? Yeah, I guess it is.
Now,
because he's not going to be a Hall of Famer no matter what, and so if he makes his money to be set for life, he would probably answer, yeah, it was worth it.
If the Ryan Braun part of this is true, and he is involved again, what you've really got is this old syndrome where you've got a superstar kind of player saying, I'm not worried, I'm untouchable. I'm Ryan Braun. It doesn't matter that I got caught, I'm just going out and do it again. There's a brazenness as you start to get to that superstar level, it seems to me, that has got, and maybe A-Rod's right in there, saying, they caught me the first time, they'll never get me again. They'll never think I'm doing it.
I think that we go back to this discussion that we have always had, not just with baseball, but with the whole performance-enhancing drugs. And it was Steve Watterson that first alerted us. Darren, you and I were doing the show back, and this was probably 10 years ago, right when the Ken Caminiti thing came out, and then the whole Andro, is Andro a steroid? Is Andro not a steroid? It was those years back then when this was fairly new, at least for baseball. But Steve Watterson, the strength coach for the Titans, talked about how back in the early 80s in the Olympics, that they were polling all the athletes. They just did a study and said, okay, we're going to give you this pill. It's going to increase your chances of winning a gold medal. It won't even guarantee it, but it's going to kill you by the age of 30. It was a ridiculous set of what ifs.
And would you do it?
Would they do it? And it was an overwhelming percentage of people said, "Oh yeah,
sure,
I'll do it." They want to win that bad. They want the fame. They want to, I guess, get the satisfaction of all the hours they put into. I don't know all the dynamics there, but they would all sign up for it.
Because I think as an athlete, your mind is so much in the moment that you're not thinking about yesterday. You're not thinking about tomorrow, and you sure as heck aren't thinking about the future, because all that's important is winning that game or getting this guy out or doing whatever's necessary in the moment to be at the highest level. And then we'll ask questions later, and then we'll react later. So that doesn't surprise me as an athlete to say that, oh, okay, you're going to be able to be the best at what you do, but you're also only going to be able to do it for a finite window. What would you do? Does not surprise me in the least. When I do it, I mean, I feel like I'm a little smarter than that and say, well, I'd like to do some other things with my life too. But if they say, hey, you do this, you're winning a gold medal guaranteed, that can be tough to turn down.
Okay, 3:29 is the time. When we come back, I'm going to ask the question and go around the table. Okay, let's say that this thing in Miami really gets ugly, and we're able to pretty much prove some of the biggest names. What happens when it's time for the next collective bargaining agreement? What changes? Stay tuned. You're listening to Sports Night, presented by Baptist Sports Medicine.